Perú, 1000 kilómetros de Lima, en una época.
En el dinámico mundo de la enseñanza de inglés, los maestros siempre han sido la guía clave para el desarrollo de los estudiantes. Pero, ¿qué sucede cuando abrazamos el cambio y nos abrimos a nuevas posibilidades? El mundo está evolucionando rápidamente y la educación debe seguir el ritmo de esta transformación. La tecnología se convierte en la herramienta que desbloquea el potencial de cada estudiante, permitiéndoles explorar y aprender de maneras nunca antes imaginadas. Las distancias se reducen y las conexiones se fortalecen. En ese contexto tan cambiante, el aula física y el espacio digital se fusionan de manera innovadora, expandiendo las oportunidades de aprendizaje. Pensando en quienes valoran la capacitación y mejora constante de sus clases, SBS Librería Internacional presenta cada año el TDC, un evento académico dirigido exclusivamente a docentes de inglés. Con la participación de destacados speakers nacionales e internacionales, representando renombradas instituciones ligadas al mundo educativo. A todos los maestros que construyen el futuro una lección a la vez, les decimos, bienvenidos al TDC.
Good afternoon to all the teachers attending the TDC Teaching Development Conference 2024, organized by SBS Librería Internacional. In this new edition, we meet again through the hybrid format, using tools that allow us to meet with colleagues connected from different parts of our country. On behalf of SBS Librería Internacional, I would like to thank you for attending this event. We are in a continuous improvement of virtual education, and we are trying to balance our reality to enhance both our virtual and face-to-face classes with amazing tools. At SBS, we have this great opportunity to be in contact with the best publishers in the world, and this makes it possible for us to bring together in a single event some of the best international specialists representing their publishers and institutions, bringing with them knowledge that has been developed in different parts of the world and to apply it successfully in our English teaching here, in our schools, institutes, universities, cities, and countries. Without further ado, I'd like to invite you to watch the following video with me. Let's go, team!
En SBS, Librería Internacional, estamos comprometidos con la educación y la difusión de la cultura a través de materiales físicos y digitales. Somos una de las cadenas más grandes de Sudamérica, orientada a producir y distribuir libros de idiomas, académicos y de interés general, así como bibliografía clásica e imprescindible. Hemos consolidado nuestra presencia en Perú, con librerías ubicadas estratégicamente en Lima, Cusco, Arequipa, Trujillo, Piura, Chiclayo, Iquitos y Huancayo. Además de una librería online, donde presentamos una gran variedad de títulos que podrás recibir desde la comodidad de tu hogar, gracias a nuestro servicio de delivery a nivel nacional. Además, acompañamos el desarrollo profesional de maestros a través de eventos académicos y capacitaciones gracias a nuestro programa SBS Advantage Docente. SBS Librería Internacional. Soluciones para quien enseña y para quien aprende.
Thank you very much, Team SBS. Now I'm going to talk about how certificates of attendance to this event will be issued. If you haven't registered yet for the conference, please do so now using the registration link in the comment box or in the video description. Remember to enter your email carefully so that you can receive your certificate without any issues. Very good. Now, to start, I want to introduce our next speaker of this event, the renowned consultant Jessica Gallagher, with the topic Mindful Moments, Social and Emotional Learning in the Classroom. Jessica Gallagher is a certified English teacher from the United States of America. She studied at the State University of New York, New Paltz, for her undergraduate degree in adolescent English education, where she also completed a minor in creative writing. She participated in various research projects which led her to her understanding of the importance of educational research. While teaching in New York City, she graduated from the City University of New York, Hunter College, STEAM School of Education, with a master's degree in teaching English as a second language, with a focus in social linguistics. She created programs and advocated for immigrant and minority students to help them have a voice in their communities. Jessica has spent the last decade teaching English as a second language for students in grades K-12, as well as at the university level. She moved to Peru in 2019, where she continues to teach and promote the importance of English education. Welcome to TDC, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Victor, for that warm welcome. So today I'm super excited to be sharing with you a really important topic all about social and emotional learning. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at what is social and emotional learning, how can you create a supportive classroom environment, how can you teach using SEL skills, how can you address some challenges and some barriers, and then also how can you measure the outcomes in your school. What I'd like to do first is I'd like to get started by answering a few questions, a little quiz to see how well you know about some statistics about our students and their mental health. So if you can take a minute and scan this QR code, it's going to bring you to 3 questions. So I'll give everyone about 30 seconds or so to try to get onto our QR code. Okay, so if you weren't able to scan the QR, that's okay. You'll still be able to see it on the screen in just a second. Okay, so our first question here is how many students will experience mental health issues in their school careers? So let's take a look. Is it 1 out of every 100, 1 out of every 30, 1 out of every 10, 1 out of every 5? What are we thinking? Okay, so we have a few for 1 out of every 30. See if anybody else wants to answer. Okay, so the correct answer is actually 1 out of every 5 students, which is a lot of students, right? A lot of people here said 1 out of every 30 or 1 out of every 10 students, but it's actually 1 out of every 5. So maybe this is something that we don't consider every single day in our classrooms, but we should be considering. Okay, next question. What percentage of secondary students feel stress on a daily basis? These are students in our 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th grade classes. How many of these students feel stress? Wow, we have a lot of people in the upper numbers, right? I see some 80s and 90s, 3 80s, I think, over there. So the correct answer here is 60% of our students. So not as high as you guys thought, but still pretty high that every single day these students feel stress. And last question here. The average teenager spends how many hours a day on a screen, whether that's a cell phone, a computer, video games, televisions? What do we think? We're completely even right now. Okay, we need some tiebreakers. We have a lot of people thinking more than 10 hours or approximately 10 hours. So the correct answer here is actually 7 hours or approximately 7 hours. It's actually 7 hours and 20 minutes to be exact. This number has gone up tremendously since the pandemic, which I'm sure we can all understand the reasons why, especially when a lot of our students use the hours or the hours of screen time on video games or on social media, for example, as a form of escapism to not deal with those mental health issues. So thank you guys so much for participating. So I am going to switch back again to our presentation. Okay, so as we're looking at social and emotional learning, I'm going to refer to it quite frequently as SEL. And I'm sure that this is a word or a phrase that you've heard pretty frequently in your schools, but maybe you're not exactly sure what it is. So, social and emotional learning, or SEL, is a process that helps young people and adults develop the knowledge, skills, and attitudes in order to build identities, manage their emotions, achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. Something that's really important to know about SEL is that these different aspects are not something that are natural for people. These are things that need to be modeled and taught. And you'll understand a little bit more as I continue. The first thing I wanted to talk about is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which, as educators, we're probably familiar with. This comes from Maslow in about 1943, and it tells us that if our physiological needs like air, water, food, temperature, right, these things are not met, then we are not able to successfully learn within the classroom. But what I like to focus on is these needs right here, the safety needs, the love and belongings, esteem, and self actualization. Maslow tells us that if these particular needs are not met, then we are again not able to learn within the classroom. And this is where SEL comes into play because SEL lets us give our students the safety and the belonging and the self esteem and the self actualization that they need in order to be able to learn. Another idea I'd like to bring into this conversation is the whole child approach, which was made by Pestalozzi and Froebel in about the 19th century, but recently it's made a comeback. So the whole child approach tells us that when a child comes into our classroom, they're not just an English student, they're not just a social studies student or a science student. They're someone who comes from a wide variety of family topics, of different sports they like, of different movies and video games. And they have this whole entire personality outside of our classrooms. And when they come to us, they bring that with them. And in order for us to teach effectively, we need to be aware of how that student is outside of our classroom, as well as how they are inside of our classroom. All of these different topics form their identities. And when we support their identities within the classroom, we know that students feel more comfortable to learn. So, what are the 5 core competencies of SEL? First, we have self awareness, then we have self management, we have social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. Now, if you think about your students, whether you teach kindergarten students all the way up to university students, maybe you've met 1 or 2 students who has a really good control over all 5 of these competencies, but probably you've met more students who maybe they're strong with social awareness, but they don't make the best decisions, or maybe they're really good at managing themselves, but aren't very good when it comes to relationships. Or maybe you have some students who struggle in all 5 of the competencies. And I think that something that's important with SEL is even if there's a student who's doing well in one of these areas, they can still benefit from learning about different methods, for example, to become more self aware or to become more aware in social situations. So the first one is self-awareness. What makes me unique? So this is telling our students or understanding how our emotions and our thoughts and behaviors, how they're unique to us and our identity. It's also about recognizing strengths and weaknesses and then setting realistic goals and expectations. So maybe you have a student who's really excelling in communications in Spanish, but is struggling in English, right? So that's one of their strengths and one of their weaknesses. And maybe setting a realistic goal would be, by the end of this trimester, I will be able to conjugate all of the regular verbs in the simple past tense, right? That's a realistic goal. Probably if your student has never learned English before, or maybe you have a student studying science or social studies, and maybe they're really struggling, it might not be a very realistic goal for them at the end of the trimester to go from having a 60% in the class all the way up to 100%. Maybe if they try really, really hard. But for the most part, it's important to set realistic goals. Why? Because it helps our students not just in their academic lives, but also in their personal lives. If they're able to set goals that they know they can achieve and they know when they achieve them, they feel more confident and they're able to plan better. They can take those skills and then transfer that into their personal lives. The next one is self-management. So how can I work through my emotions? This one's very important, especially for teachers who are teaching the younger students, probably all the way up to middle school, high school as well sometimes. This is about regulating emotions effectively. So does my emotion that I'm showing, does it have the same connection to the problem, or is it bigger than the actual problem, which I'll talk a little bit about later as well. Managing stress and anxiety, setting and achieving goals. Again, you'll see this throughout SEL. And then the last one, practicing self-discipline. So maybe I have a math test on Thursday, but I really want to stay up and I really want to play Fortnite with my friends on Wednesday night. So how can I practice self-discipline and say, okay, I'm going to play on Fortnite for 1 hour and then I'm going to study for 2 hours, right? How can we teach our students to do this? The next one is social awareness. So what are the rules? This is understanding the perspectives and emotions of others, empathizing with others, and recognizing and appreciating diversity. So, for example, in my class, I teach 4th and 5th grade currently. I have students who are on all different levels and some are just learning English, some are native speakers. And sometimes in my class, I have to differentiate worksheets or homework. And I often had one student who's a native speaker who would complain and say, oh, but that student, he's getting an easier worksheet than I am. And we really had to sit together and I had to explain to him that his strength is the English language, but maybe the student that he was referencing maybe is really struggling. So for him, that homework is very, very difficult. But for the native student, it's pretty easy. And the native student also has some weaknesses. So maybe his weakness is math, or maybe his weakness is Spanish. So it's important that we teach students this and we model this to them as well, so that they're able to recognize and appreciate those different perspectives and emotions. And the last one is relationship skills. So how can I effectively work with other people? I know there's a big push in today's classrooms to work collaboratively. A lot of times in the workplace as well, we're encouraged to work as a team. And this is a life skill that students will need for the rest of their lives to build and maintain positive relationships, to communicate effectively, right? So we want students to be able to debate and to argue respectfully and peacefully. The same with resolving conflicts peacefully. We don't want students to fly off the handle as soon as they get upset. They need to be able to work together and compromise and come to solutions. And then the last bullet point here, cooperating with others. So a big part of teaching relationship skills is giving students opportunities to, one, work with other students. So we don't typically want to be putting them in the same groups with the same students. And two, to be assigning roles to students. So maybe we can say, okay, this time, this group, Mary is going to be the leader. And then the next project we have, Mary, you're going to be the note taker, right? So giving them these roles helps them to try out different positions in a team and helps them to see kind of where they feel comfortable and where they do their best work. And here's responsible decision making. So, how can I make good decisions? Which is something that I have to remind my students about, right? So, not only about making the decision, but thinking about or considering the consequences of that action before they make the decision. So, we have to have them make informed choices based on ethical principles. Once again, considering the consequences of those actions. Setting and achieving goals comes back again, and then problem solving and decision making skills. So if we have students who are not future thinkers and are not considering that what they do today could potentially have a consequence tomorrow, it might not be beneficial for them, right? To be making these decisions in their lives and not really thinking about those consequences. So we really have to help them. One thing you can do in your classroom, which I've done, is when a student is making a poor decision or choosing to make a poor decision, I can say to them, okay, I see that you're not sitting in your seat. You have choices, right? You can sit in your seat and you can continue with the lesson, and then everything will be okay. Or you can continue walking around the room, and then I'm going to have to call the dean, or then I'm going to have to send an email to your mom, and that's going to be the consequence, right? So, really laying out the consequence for them before it becomes an extreme or comes to that point is helpful for our students. Okay, so next I want to switch over to how can we create a supportive classroom environment? Of course, we want to establish a positive and inclusive classroom culture. We want to model respectful behavior and communication, encourage empathy and understanding among students. I always say that if, as the teacher, we walk into the classroom and we're saying, okay, take out your books, be quiet, sit down, get started, come on, open up the books. Why are you not reading yet? Where's your homework? Where's your pencil? That's not the most positive environment. It's also not the most respectful environment. If I'm raising my voice at my students, why would my students think that it's not, or it isn't okay to raise their voice at me, right? It's really important that we give our students the respect that we want back. That's modeling that respect. And once again, encouraging empathy and understanding among students. Another idea around this is when grades go out, right? So a lot of times students will immediately get their test and think, oh my gosh, I either want to share this with the entire class. I'm really excited. I want to kind of brag about this. Or maybe I got not such a good grade and I want to stick it in my backpack. But students will ask other students will ask their friends, they'll share those grades around. And a lot of times we see students maybe making fun of other students or saying, oh, I got a better grade than you. And we want to model respectful behavior so that students don't have these actions or don't partake in these actions that could lead to some difficult relationships between our students. So, I want to share with you some realistic ideas that you can use in your classroom starting on Monday. The first is the check in, check out board. So, I'm sure that many of you have to take attendance in your classes. And one way you can do this is you can take little marbles and write the student's number on it. I would not personally write their name on it because I think it's important that this remains as anonymous as possible. And as the student enters the classroom, you ask them to take their number and put it on a different feeling. So here we can see two students are happy, one student's relaxed, there are two students who are sad, and maybe these students haven't come to class yet. So what's important about this particular chart is one, it gives the students the language that they need in order to express their emotions. So sometimes, especially with our little guys, we see students say, I feel really happy right now. but they actually aren't feeling happy. They're feeling excited or they're feeling silly, right? And the same with sad. A lot of times students tell me, oh, I just feel sad. But do you feel annoyed, right? Do you feel shy maybe? Do you feel sleepy, right? What exactly are you feeling? And by giving them the language, especially if you're an English teacher, these are great feeling words to teach. You're empowering them to say, okay, I can recognize this feeling and I'm going into class and I'm going to share this feeling with the teacher. The second thing that this does is it gives me as a teacher a check-in, right? So I can say to myself, okay, maybe Miranda and Delilah are feeling happy and maybe Dennis is feeling annoyed. So I know that I'm going to check in with Dennis before the class starts. Maybe Michael is feeling sleepy. So if he puts his head down, I'm going to give him a few minutes. That's going to be okay. Right, so this is an excellent strategy. You can also use this if you're teaching online classes. So you can use, just like I use the Mentimeter or Kahoot, or you can just put it in the chat as well and ask students how they're feeling, but keep it anonymous, like I said. The next thing that you can do is use these different I would say picto boards. There's tons of these on the internet. So my students are currently really into Pokemon. So here it says, on a scale of Pikachu, how are you today? And they can pick, I'm not sure if you can see the little numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they can explain why they feel that, right? And I think that activities like this make students feel really heard and really seen, but also it's a nice way to start the day or start the class. It's something that's fun and enjoyable. If you have a really big class, if you have 25, 30 students, what you can do is tell all of your students, okay, pick one of the Pikachus and write down in your notebook why you're feeling the way that the Pikachu is portrayed. And then I'm going to pick 5 people at the end of the 5-minute timer, and they're going to share only if they want to. Mhm. Okay, the next idea seems like a simple idea, but is incredibly impactful. So, talking about greetings at the door. So, research tells us that when teachers stand physically at the door and greet their students, negative behaviors in the classroom reduce by at least 30%, which that's a lot if you consider how simple this action is. One of my favorite ideas is to have a choice board outside the classroom. So you can see it here as well on the little picture next to the door. But this one says you can choose a hug, a high five, a fist bump, a handshake, or a wave. And for your students who maybe can't read yet, you can also choose these little images over here. So what does this do? This tells the student, I'm here, I see you, I value you in my classroom or our classroom. Maybe they need to tell you something. It's a great way to get them into the door. If we think about our students, there are probably several who have very limited contact, individual contact with the teacher every single day, right? There are those students who, maybe we have students who are just shy, or maybe we have students who don't particularly like coming to school and they like to fly under the radar, or maybe the opposite. Maybe we have the students who love coming to school and are never problems, never have any behavioral problems. So the teacher never really has a reason to interact with them. We would hope that the teacher is interacting with every single student individually, but like I said, sometimes that's not the case. So activities like this are really, really great to just say, okay, I know that I saw their face. I can get a quick check, a quick understanding of where they're at, and then we can start the class. The next idea is to use attendance questions. So just like I was saying before with the Pikachus, these are really fun. They're really engaging. You can do something a little bit more serious, like this Growth Mindset Monday. What is something you want to learn how to do but can't do yet? Right. Once again, you can have students write this. You can have students turn to their partner and talk about their answer. You can share it as a whole group. Here's another one. Would you rather live in a zoo or in an aquarium? And once again, activities like this seem pretty silly, but you can learn so much about students. For example, maybe your student tells you, I would rather live in an aquarium because last year I got to go to the aquarium with my grandma and I don't get to see her so much. So that makes me miss her, right? And saying something along the lines of that gives you so much insight into a student and their background. The next one is positive affirmations. So, even as adults, positive affirmations, just saying statements out loud, is shown to improve whatever task you're trying to do towards your desired outcome. So, if I'm struggling with something and I say to myself out loud, this is hard, I know I can do it, that actually rewires the brain to tell us, okay, you can do this, and motivates you just by saying the words out loud. So you can start a class by saying, I am enough, right? And having the students repeat it, or today I am a leader. Maybe if your student chooses to make a negative choice, you can have them repeat, I forgive myself for my mistakes, right? Because it's not just about the other students forgiving them and the teacher forgiving them. It's also about them forgiving themselves. Here we have an affirmation station. And I love this. A lot of classrooms have mirrors in them. So I am kind, I am funny, I'm courageous, right? Words that inspire and words that maybe students don't hear on a daily basis. It's interesting to hear which words students choose for themselves, right? So I have a particular student who we have an affirmation station, and this student, I always have pictured him as a very nervous student. And he had chosen from the affirmation station, I am confident. And I thought, wow, that's amazing, right? Because once again, maybe it's not true just yet. But if he keeps repeating it over and over and he says it to himself, maybe then he will become confident one day. That's the hope. I've also seen positive affirmations being used before exams, especially. I've seen teachers say them out loud and have students repeat them. Like I said, there's some little songs with positive affirmations in them. You can also write it on the actual test. So you can have a spot maybe for your high school students that says positive affirmation, and they write one sentence about something that they want to come true, right? Something that they're trying really hard to believe or they do believe. Or maybe for your younger students, you can have three choices and they circle one, right? Maybe um, I'm going to try my best on this exam, right? And they circle that. Or I know that my writing will improve, and they can circle that. Okay, so now I would like to share with you some ways that you can teach SEL skills. The first idea is talking about Carol Dweck's 2006 idea of a growth mindset. Now, I've spoken a little bit about this, but haven't labeled it as growth mindset. A growth mindset is thinking to yourself that things can change and that just because maybe you're not good at something right now, or maybe you're struggling with something, that doesn't mean that you're not able to accomplish your goals in the future. Now, the reason why growth mindsets are super important is we found that when adults have these fixed mindsets, they are very difficult to change. So, if we teach and instill these ideas in children at a young age, even if you start now with high school students or even university students, it can benefit them once again, not only in their academic lives, but also in their personal lives. They take this with them, right? So a fixed mindset looks like, I don't like to be challenged. I can't do it, right? How many times do we hear our students say that? Or I've heard my students say pretty frequently, like, oh, English is so hard. I'm never going to be able to learn English. Feedback is personal, or I'm just going to stick to what I know. I'm not going to try anything or think outside of the box. These are ideas that are fixed. And then if we change it to a growth mindset, I can learn to do anything I want, right? Challenges help me grow, mistakes help me grow, Feedback is constructive. I like to try new things. Growth mindset is promoting taking risks and making mistakes within the classroom. I tell my students that if they're going to make a mistake, if they're going to take a risk, now is the time to do it, right? The classroom is the absolute best place to make a mistake because it's a place where someone is there, where your whole community is there to help you grow. So when we teach our students about this, they're then able to take it and internalize it and hopefully, like I said, use it when we're not there to show them how to use it and in their personal lives, right? Another thing you can do with growth mindset is to model. So, for example, maybe if I drop something on the floor, I'm being a little clumsy. Maybe immediately I would think to myself, "Oh my gosh, why did I do that? I'm so clumsy." But I can change it to a growth mindset of thinking, "Oh wow, I should look where I'm going, and I think in the future I won't do that again, right? Because I know that I tripped over the corner of that desk." Or maybe I can say to myself, if I'm trying to do something with technology in my class and it's getting really frustrating. Maybe my smart board's not turning on, and my students can see it. I can model to them instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, this computer, I can't deal with it." I can say, "Okay, the computer is not working right now. I can't control that. I'm just going to have to be patient and I'm going to have to wait until the computer turns on. I know eventually the computer will turn on or the technology people will come, but I just have to be patient and wait." Okay. The next idea is talking about the circle of control. So the picture over here on the yellow background is actually from a kindergarten classroom. So you can start talking about circles of control from a very, very young age. The circle of control, you ask your students, what can you control? Right? So I can control how many hours I study for the test. I can control waking up on time and getting in the car or walking to school and getting there on time. I can control the things I say to my friends. I can control what book I'm reading. I can control what sports I want to play, right? These are things that I can control. Then you want to ask your students, what are the things that you cannot control? These are going to go on the outside circle. So I can't control what questions are going to be on the exam. I can't control how my friends' opinions of me, right? Or what they're going to say to me. I can't control that recess has been canceled because there's bad weather, right? So, what you want to teach your students is to reference the circle of control, the things you can control. Why? Because when you tell your students, hey, focus on that inner circle when maybe they're really getting stressed out, maybe they're having a panic attack, and they start spiraling with their thoughts, you refocus them and say, focus in on that inner circle. Try to think about what you can control in this moment. All the other things you can't control. And a lot of times, when students can visualize this, they can start to find solutions to their problems rather than, like I said, spiraling around all of these emotions on things that they have no control over. The other idea is the size of the problem, which I spoke a little bit about at the beginning. So, does the reaction match the size of the problem? And I like to think about this when maybe you have a 3 or 4 year old who isn't getting what they want. Maybe they want cookies for lunch, and you say, no, you can't have cookies today. And then their size of their reaction is huge. They throw a big tantrum and they're throwing their hands around and they're crying and they're screaming, right? But a lot of times we don't realize that even our high school students, even our university students, are also sometimes have reactions that don't match the size of the problem. And maybe they don't look like all out temper tantrums. But for example, in university, the size of a problem could be, or a problem could be, I failed an exam. And the reaction could be that your student drops the course, they withdraw from the course, right? So that does not match the size of the reaction. Or another example is a student is in class and maybe the teacher says, okay, I'm going to start calling on students to read. And the student doesn't like to read out loud. So they say, can I go to the bathroom? And they leave the classroom, right? So the size of the problem there doesn't match the size of the reaction. I like to use this visual as well with my students because I think it helps them to see. And you can even say, point to what number the size of the problem is. So maybe my friend stole the basketball during recess. Maybe that should be this, the size of the problem is a 4. But maybe when you're talking to the student, they put their finger on a 10. And that really shows you where their thinking is as well. And then you can speak to them and say, actually, maybe the size of the problem is a little bit lower than a 10, right? Let's put it at about a 4. And now let's put our other finger on the size of the reaction, right? So instead of talking with your friend, you screamed at your friend and you hit them. So that's a 10, right? So we need to get the size of the problem and the size of the reaction a little bit closer. We also have a lot of different worksheets like this one here. The size of the problem worksheet, big versus little problems. This is a great activity to do in the beginning of the school year or the beginning of a new trimester. So talking about what different people see as tiny problems and what different people see as huge problems. For example, I personally do not like being late to things. I get very anxious and very nervous when I'm late. So for me, being late would probably be around a 4. But for other people, being late would probably be a tiny problem. I think that talking about what is a problem for some people in a classroom community is important because then you can see the differences and students can become more respectful towards one another. Another example is I have a student who gets very, very frustrated when other students tap their pens. It really bothers him. He's not able to focus. So he's expressed this to the class. And for him, that's a huge problem that he can't focus because of the tapping. So now that the class community is aware of that, they're more sensitive to that. And when they do start tapping their pen, a lot of times another student will say, hey, you know, this student doesn't like it. Please make sure that you stop, right? To give them respect and help them have the environment that they need. Okay, another thing that you can do is use breathing techniques. So sometimes we are in situations with students where they are to the point where they are so incredibly upset that they can't catch their breath, whether that's through crying or they're very nervous. Um, I've seen situations where students just shut down, but you can really see the anxiety in their eyes. And this is where breathing techniques become really helpful. I recommend teaching breathing techniques, but not in the time of crisis, right? So you don't want a student who's hysterical crying and can't catch their breath. You don't want to say, okay, now I want to teach you how to breathe. No, that's not the time, right? It's important to teach these beforehand so that they can translate them into those moments. So I'm going to teach you 2 now. So the first one is 5-finger breathing. So if you put up your hand and you breathe in and you breathe out and you breathe in and out, in, out, in, out, in, out. And you'll probably have some students who at first maybe think it's a little silly and they go, okay, and they just breathe in and out really, really quickly. But after a while, I have found that students do like these little brain breaks and they kind of calm them down. I teach a class right after recess. So every single class, my students know during this particular time schedule, they know that we are going to be doing some kind of brain break, which usually includes breathing. Sometimes it includes just putting their head down and listening to a soft song for a minute to really recenter students. The other breathing technique that is super easy is the birthday candle technique. So you tell your students, okay, I want you to picture in your brain you have 5 big birthday cakes in front of you. And on the birthday cakes, there's 100 candles. Now, in order to blow out 100 candles, you can't breathe like, no, you have to take in a really, really deep breath and blow them all out. And remember, you have 5 birthday cakes, so you have to do this 5 times. A thing that's great about these techniques is you don't need anything to use them, right? You can just say, okay, you have your hand or you have your imagination. You don't need any worksheets or any manipulatives. You can just do it in the moment. Hopefully, then what happens is if your students then do get to a crisis mode and do start to hyperventilate or do start to get really angry or anxious, like I was saying, then you can remind them, okay, remember in class we did the 5-finger breathing. Let's try that now. Or remember I taught you the last time all about the birthday cake. Let's try to picture the birthday cake and let's try to calm ourselves down before we start talking about these emotions. The next idea is using social stories. Now, there are tons and tons of social stories on the internet. You can buy them in stores. And I like to use social stories for all different ages. And typically, what they do is they focus on one issue that students need to work on. For example, Caddy the cat learns about personal space, or I can make transitions at school. So, what you do is you teach your students or you show your students this book, you read it to them. And then when you notice that students are not following those social rules, they're typically about the social rules, you can reference it. So, if students are pushing as they're making a line, you can say, oh, do you remember that cat named Caddy? What was happening with the cat? Did she need to give her friends a little bit of space? Can you show me how you can give your friends a little bit of space? And you'd be surprised how good students' memories are when it comes to stories that they've read. Now, people ask me all the time, well, what do I do with my high school students? What do I do with my university students? I can't read them Caddy the Cat. And yes, that would be developmentally inappropriate to be reading at this level. But what you can do is you can read stories that pertain to things that have happened in their lives, or maybe you've noticed something in the class and you want to kind of talk about it without directly making the statement. For example, maybe you have a high school class and you've noticed that there's a lot of gossip going on in the class. So, what I would do is I would choose a story, choose a piece of literature, could be a short story or chapter book, and read it with the students and specifically make sure that the topic of gossiping is in that story. And then what you can do is ask your students, have you ever been in this situation? Maybe don't say names, but what did you do? What was the solution? Did you contribute to the gossip in any way? And it helps them really reflect on their own lives to say, okay, I'm just like the person in the story, or I don't want to be like the person in the story. Okay, we also have role playing. So, a lot of times, like I said, when you see an issue happening in the classroom, here's a picture, for example, 2 students who cannot share, right? Or who are struggling to share. What I would do is tell the whole class, okay, we're going to be doing some role playing today. I'm going to show you a bunch of different scenarios, and I want us to come up with some solutions. You can also do role playing where you ask your students to show you opposite solutions, right? Like negative solutions to the problem. And I think students like this because it's an opportunity to maybe like break the rules or not be the best student, but in an acting way, in a playful way. And you can really recognize, or the class community can really recognize, oh, okay, so if someone's not sharing, I can't pull the ball away, right? That's a silly thing to do. But maybe what I can do is use my words, ask them politely if I can use the basketball for 2 minutes and then they can use the basketball. And once again, what I would do is probably split students into groups and then have them come up with solutions. In the older grades, this works as well, right? So maybe you decide, okay, I want the students to act out the scenario, or maybe like the picture here, I just want to talk about the scenario. Once again, relating it to their own lives of, has this ever happened to you? Do you know anyone that this has happened to? What was the solution for their problem? What would you recommend if your friend was going through this issue? And it really helps students, once again, use language to define emotions and relate it to their own lives. So I know that when we're talking about SEL, there's going to be some challenges and barriers. There's challenges and barriers with every single educational topic, right? There's some people who support it, some people who don't support it. So, for example, 74% of teachers are devoting more time to teaching SEL today compared to 5 years ago. And if you think about 5 years ago, before the pandemic, maybe SEL wasn't as prominent, but we know as teachers in the classroom today that it is incredibly, incredibly important. But only 22% of teachers feel that they're very prepared to teach SEL, right? Maybe they don't have the resources, or maybe they think, oh, I'm a teacher. I can't do that, right? I'm not a psychologist. I don't even know where to start. So the first challenge is time and resources. A lot of us do not have a lot of time during class. We're getting towards the end of the school year. Maybe teachers are struggling to even complete their curriculum, and you think to yourself, how can I even put this in? So SEL activities don't have to be time consuming or resource intensive. Just like the very practical examples I showed you, you don't have to go and buy a curriculum that you're going to do every single day for 3 hours, right? You can slowly put it in with just small daily moments, and you can integrate it into your existing curriculum and your daily routines, right? We want to teach these valuable skills throughout the day, both inside and outside of the classroom. One trick that I recently learned was, if I see a student in the hallway and they're not supposed to be in the hallway, maybe they're taking a little longer to get back from the bathroom, I say to them, can I walk you back to class? Rather than, what are you doing in the hallway? Now go get a late pass. You're missing a lot of time, right? And it takes me, what, 30 seconds, 1 minute to walk the student back to their class. But in that time, I'm building a relationship with them and getting to know them. And maybe I can even find out why they're not going back to class. And of course, prioritizing SEL demonstrates your commitment to your school's holistic development, right? Focusing on the whole child and creating a supportive learning environment. Challenge 2 is teacher or parent resistance, right? So once again, teachers may be feeling that they're not psychologists, they have a lot to deal with, or parents as well saying, stick to teaching math, stick to teaching English. But as we know from Maslow's hierarchy, that if those needs are not met and we're not addressing the emotional concerns of the student, then we're not going to be able to teach them effectively. So, again, addressing concerns involves providing practical support and resources. A lot of times, as a teacher, people tell me, build relationships with your students, but they don't tell me how to, right? They don't give me the tools or the practical support. So, that's something that schools definitely need to provide. You can also share success stories. You can offer professional development opportunities, and show teachers how SEL can be seamlessly integrated into daily classroom routines. So if you are trying out SEL in your classroom and you see a few different tips and tricks, you can ask maybe your principal or your coordinator, can I share this with my team? I think that this would benefit everyone on a school-wide level. Remember, even small steps can make a significant impact. Like I said about just standing in the doorway, you can have so many positive interactions and build those positive relationships just by that small, small little action. And last, by highlighting the benefits of SEL for students and provide tangible examples, you can encourage others to embrace this valuable approach to education. So at the end, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about outcomes and the research that's been performed in different schools all around the world that shows that SEL is effective. The last challenge is probably the most difficult challenge. What do you do when you have severe behavioral issues or trauma within the classroom with your students? So, addressing behavioral challenges with SEL involves fostering positive and supportive environment, right? It's probably going to be very difficult the first day, the first week of school to build these relationships. It's going to take a long time. But by building trust, teaching those self regulation and empathy, and providing positive reinforcement, as well as modeling correct behaviors, we can redirect negative behaviors. We can empower students to express their emotions and model healthy coping mechanism. It's crucial for the classroom environment to succeed. And establishing clear expectations, involving students in the process, and consistently following through on consequences, right? We have to maintain a structured classroom. So, a lot of times when I'm talking about or creating rules within the classroom or guidelines, right, or something we need to follow, the norms, I ask for my students' input. And I say, okay, do we think it's fair that everyone has to raise their hand before they speak? And then my students talk about it. And then I say, okay, and if we do not raise our hand before we speak, what do we think is an appropriate consequence? Right. And then the students discuss. And it helps them feel like their voice matters within the classroom. The last point is something that I cannot emphasize enough. So, oftentimes, when we have these students who are very, very challenging, we take their trauma home with us, right? Maybe as teachers, we're struggling because we have a student who is exhibiting really negative behaviors and we don't know what to do and we're so frustrated. In these situations, seeking support from trained staff members is necessary, right? You don't have to feel like, oh, I'm doing an SEL program, so all of my students' behavior is going to be absolutely perfect. That's just not the case, right? SEL is going to help significantly, but we still may have some students who are just having more difficulty in adapting. And that's where you should not feel that you're alone or that you cannot go to the school psychologist or the school's grade level director for help, because everyone in the school has the same exact idea, the same exact goal, that they want the students to succeed. So no one would judge you if you needed to seek support for specific students. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about is measuring SEL outcomes. So, in schools, how can we figure out, is this actually working? One thing that I've seen in schools that I love is the points of contact. So, you can do this within a class or within a whole school community. You write out the student's name, and then all the teachers go through and check or write their initial. Do they know Sally Walker by her name, her face, her personal information? Do they know academic status and behavioral status? And as you look at this data, it's really telling. For example, here, Leo Miller, 2 teachers know his name and know his academic status, right? So this is probably a student who does very well academically, does not have any behavioral problems. On the other hand, Tom Legend, you can see that all of the teachers know his behavioral status. So this is a student who's talked about a lot by teachers or admin. So what does this do for us? This tells us as teachers that we need to give more attention to Leo Miller and his personal information. And maybe we should try to figure out what he looks like, right? Because no teacher here said that they know his face. Once again, you can use this in the classroom or you can use this as a whole school, but it's a really great way to see, am I reaching every single individual student? Okay, and we're just going to watch a little video from the website Castle, which is one of the leading researchers in SEL today.
I'm a data guy, I like numbers, and we have a lot of evidence that social emotional learning has made a difference.
We had a graduation rate of 62%. Last year, we put up a record-breaking 84%.
Over the last 5 years, our expulsions have been cut in half.
We were suspending about 13,000 days of out-of-school suspension. We were 10 times the average for any school district in Ohio. And within that first year alone, we were able to reduce our out-of-school suspensions by 55%.
Attendance rates went up. We know that attendance is directly correlated to academic improvement and achievement, but it also had other outcomes that were extremely important, which is students feeling more connected to schools, educators having to think outside the box, helping students overcome some of the challenges that are in their life.
There's an 11-to-1 return on investment. So for every dollar invested in programming around social emotional learning, we're seeing that they're saving $11 on remedial programs, dropout prevention. There's lots of reasons that people are coming to the conclusion that this is something that we need to be prioritizing.
Okay, so some of the things that we just saw that are being improved within the classrooms are attendance rates, right? And they had said we know that higher attendance rates means higher academic achievement, but also we saw different improvements in social skills, decision-making skills, and we can also see here, right? So improvement in pro-social behavior, attitudes about self, others, and school, reduction in problem behaviors, reduction in emotional distress, standardized achievement test scores went up, and the largest amount here, 23% of an increase in social and emotional skills. So the last thing that I'd like to leave you guys with is my favorite poem, and it talks a little bit about that whole child, right? How when a child enters your classroom or when a teenager or an adult, they're not just coming in completely a clean slate, like nothing has happened to them in the morning or the day before. There's no stress. They're completely open and ready to learn. That's not the case. So it's called "'Cause I Ain't Got a Pencil" by Joshua T. Dickerson. I woke myself up because we ain't got an alarm clock. Dug in the dirty clothes basket because ain't nobody washed my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark because the lights ain't on. Even got my baby sister ready because my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat us a good breakfast. Then, when I got to class, the teacher fussed because I ain't got a pencil. Right? So I like to remember this poem when I'm dealing with a student maybe who is challenging, maybe making a lot of negative choices one after another, that there's probably something else going on besides what I'm seeing right in front of me. And by using all of the different SEL techniques, you can really, like I said, build the relationships, build the trust, help students to regulate their emotions in order to feel comfortable sharing those emotions with you, to get to a point where they feel like they're in a safe academic setting and they can succeed. Okay, so I think now what we'd like to do is take some questions and answers. So I'm just going to switch back over. If anyone has any questions, if they'd like to write them in the chat, I'll take a minute. Okay. So Rosa wrote, what are the best strategies to work with Kinder? So I would say when you're talking about SEL, Kinder is the place to start, right? Of course, if you're a high school teacher or university teacher, you can incorporate these into your lessons, these strategies, but kindergarten, first grade, that's where you start. So the first thing I would do, Rosa, is make sure that students have that language, right? Maybe you can show them with puppets or with animals. Okay, this one's angry, this one's sad, this one's happy, and really make sure that they can see what those emotions are and give a name to those different feelings, right? The second and third one that I would say, or even the fourth, right? All the different strategies that I spoke about that you can easily integrate into your classrooms on Monday or on Tuesday, all the strategies could be used in Kinder, definitely. Another thing that's really important with Kinder is to get families on board. So speak to parents, talk to them and say, we're talking about controlling our feelings during class. We're role playing different scenarios about sharing or about raising our hand or keeping our body still. So talking to the parents and getting them involved will help support the ideas that you're teaching in class at home as well. And like if you do breathing techniques, you can send home a little worksheet and say to parents, hey, we're doing these breathing techniques. If you see your child is becoming angry, or maybe even you're becoming angry as the parent, you can model the breathing techniques. So I would say all of the different strategies that I mentioned today, plus a few more. Thank you so much, Rosa. Okay. So Anna said how to make teenagers love learning English. Super challenging, right? I think that teenagers are in a great position to learn English, and it's actually one of the best times for teachers to be able to teach. Why? Because English right now is such a global language where music, Netflix shows, fashion. There's a lot that's going on in English. So, what I would do is I would try to relate your English lessons to your teenagers. If your teenagers love Sabrina Carpenter, bring that into the classroom. If your teenagers love Mr. Beast on YouTube, bring that into the classroom. Do a listening activity. When we're doing the same exact activities of, okay, I'm going to put all the verbs on the board and you're going to write I, you, he, she, it, we, they into your notebook. We need to try to engage them a little bit, right? We're fighting our teenagers. We're fighting against the digital age. We're fighting against TikTok and Instagram and all of these different things on their screens that they're so addicted to and they love. So we have to be just as engaging to make sure that they are super excited to come to our classes. Okay, thank you to Anna. Okay, Karen wrote, how can we bring support to our students if we see them just 2 or 3 times a week? Yeah, also really challenging. Sometimes English teachers only see students once a week. Sometimes they only see them virtually, right? I would say using the different strategies with SEL, but when you talk about bringing support to your students, I would say offering resources that they can use when they're outside of the classroom. So, for example, with teenagers, I've used this like different mindful applications and said, okay, do you guys want to download this onto your phone? A lot of them are also in English, which is great for me as an English teacher. So maybe if you're feeling upset or you're feeling lonely, you can listen to one of like a guided meditation or something to help you breathe. And then they can use it outside of the classroom. I think in order for us to build relationships with our students that we just see 2 or 3 times a week, we need to really make sure that we're including SEL in each of our lessons, right? It can't just be a once a month thing. I've had a lot of teachers who teach virtually ask me and say, I don't feel like I'm building relationships with my students virtually. And these are the opportunities that we need to take and really try to get to know our students on an individual basis to help them to grow. Thanks so much, Karen. I hope that was a little helpful. Let's see if there's any more. Yes. Okay. So Maria brought up the virtual classes, right? So what strategies do you recommend for integrating social emotional learning in virtual classes with students at different levels, right? So if you're teaching English and you have students who are maybe on an A1 basic level, I think it's appropriate to maybe, for example, those attendance questions, you can scaffold them with multiple choice. You can include pictures of different feelings. If students maybe don't have the language, you can show like the Pikachu's different photos and say, this person's feeling angry. This one's feeling stressed. You can also, if your community or your school allows it, you can use Spanish, right? So you can say to a student, okay, I want these 2 students to stay after class with me for 5 minutes virtually, and we're just going to have a conversation in Spanish and see how your weekend was, right? So it's not actually within the class, but you're still building the relationships that you need in order to help them feel confident with you. Oh, okay, so it looks like that was all the questions. So I would like to thank you guys so much again for taking the time to learn about this incredibly important topic. I hope that some of the strategies I shared with you today are something that you can use within your classrooms, but also more importantly, some of the information you can share with the people in your schools. So thank you guys so much again.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I think it was very insightful and very helpful for all of us. Thank you indeed. Okay, so continuing with our agenda, we welcome and thank Universidad de Piura for their participation in the TDC 2024. The Universidad de Piura, UDEP, founded in 1969, is one of Peru's leading private universities with campuses in Piura and Lima. Known for its strong academic programs in engineering, law, economics, and communication, UDEP is committed to providing high-quality education rooted in ethical values and academic excellence. The university also houses a language center which offers courses in various languages, promoting multilingual proficiency and cultural understanding among students and professionals. UDEP's dedication to research, innovation, and leadership has earned it national and international recognition. Guided by the principles of Opus Dei, the university emphasizes service to society, integrity, and lifelong learning. So let's find out a bit more about Universidad de Piura with the following video.
Estamos agradecidos con los que estuvieron desde el inicio y por la vida heroica de los que ya no están con nosotros. Con su dedicación y esfuerzo, construyeron lo inimaginable. Ahora hemos de seguir mirando hacia adelante, sin olvidar nuestro origen, con el servicio y el trabajo bien hecho. Porque es verdad, hacemos universidad, con un estilo particular y una extraordinaria tradición de cultura humanística, porque solo formándonos humanamente podremos hacer un impacto en nuestra sociedad. Y no estamos solos, vamos todos juntos. Somos líderes de nuestro camino. Tomemos la posta de nuestros antecesores, sin defraudar su espíritu generoso y desprendido con el que nació nuestra universidad. La Universidad de Piura. 50 años y recién empezamos.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to introduce you to the renowned specialist Julio Valladares on the subject of building writing skills. Julio Valladares holds an MA in TFL and bachelor's degree in education. He has been a teacher of English for more than 38 years now. He has worked for Britannico, Richmond, Camelot as a teacher and teacher trainer, and is currently working for Universidad de Piura. He is in charge of the Cambridge Exams and Management at UDEP, Campus Lima, and teacher trainer coordinator for the TFL programs. He is also professor at the School of Medicine of Universidad de Piura, Campus Lima. Welcome to TDC, Julio.
Hi, hello. Thank you very much, Victor, and thank you for being here so we can share some ideas with all of you. And today we're going to talk about building writing skills. Now, everybody talk about developing writing skills, but how can we build writing skills? Yes, and this is going to be the topic of this presentation. I would like to see, can you show the presentation, please? Let's see. Oh, it's loading. Can you please wait a minute? This has to do with SEL, no, social emotional learning. And we have to be patient. We have to breathe in and breathe out. Yes, and then we're going to start. That's it. You see, breathe in and breathe out. It works. SEL. So building writing skills. When it comes the word writing, teaching writing, how do you feel? Speaking of SEL, how do you feel as teachers? How can you build writing skills? How can you teach writing skills? How can you develop writing skills? How do you feel? Yeah. Do you feel stressed? Do you feel confident? Do you feel like it's not working? Those are questions that you have to keep in mind when we're developing and we're building writing skills. Yes. I would like to start with presentation here. Yes, Angie. Well, Angie, I like writing. That's good. That's good. Yes. So that's a good point. I like writing. If you like writing, there you are. The question is, what happens if I don't write much? How can I motivate my students to write? How can I start building my students' writing skills if I don't write much? And there is kind of this bridge that we should have. It doesn't work. And that's why sometimes we just end up saying, okay, now write what you did last weekend. So if we can, how can I continue with the, wait a minute. Thank you. Now I have a picture there, you know, a pencil, a pen, a notepad, and a laptop. Why do you think I want to start with this picture? Because maybe you may be thinking, but now students, they don't write by hand, they just use the computer, the laptop. Everything is corrected there. No? And parentheses, imagine artificial intelligence now. Everybody's doing homework using artificial intelligence. So how can I build writing skills into my students if they have AI at hand? The thing is it possible? Yes, it is. But it depends on what you do with your students. How can you approach this writing skills procedure? Yes. Is it possible to work with is it possible to use this two tools in order to develop? So can I build writing skills using a laptop? My students, yes, you can. How can I face the danger of overusing artificial intelligence? Those are questions that we're going to think about during this talk. Yes. Now, can we go for the next? Yes. Those are questions for you to start thinking. Yes. When was the last time you wrote something in Spanish? Apart from the emails that we write every single day, no? When was the last time? Or apart from the lesson planning, or apart from the school tasks that we have to write every single day? I mean, write maybe a poem, write maybe your diary. How many of you have a diary? How many of you write letters? We don't write letters anymore. It's just an email. It's just a WhatsApp. No, TikToking. Yes. But when was the last time you, as teachers, wrote something in Spanish, wrote something in English? And then the question comes, how often do you, teachers, ask your students to write in English? Something to think about. No, I don't write much, but I ask my students to write a lot. Why? Oh, because we have to. or because those are the school policies, or because Minedu forces us to do that. We may have plenty of answers to those questions, but again, think about those questions, reflect on those questions. You know? And the third one is, what is a typical piece of homework you give? I always use the example, write about what you did last weekend, or write about what you did on your last holiday or vacation, usually at the beginning of the year. Why? How do you prepare your students in order to write that piece of homework? Is it just enough giving them vocabulary? Is it enough to give them the idea? What it comes to your minds is, how can you help your students building writing skills? Brainstorming, yes, ideas, yes, creating context, everything is important there. But what else? What else can you say? What else can you think about? Yes. Marco, hi Marco, writing short paragraphs. Who? You or the students? How can you teach your students? How can you help your students? How can you foster your students to write short paragraphs? If you're teaching kindergarten or primary teachers, low primary, for example, low primary students, how can you start promoting writing? No, Julio, they don't know how to write in English, obviously. But can you start building writing skills in English? Yes. Yes. The same way as you start working with Spanish. When you start writing, you know, the fine motor skills with the letters, that's writing. Now that you can connect, for example, no? Teresa, hi, you say emails now. Yes, emails. Emoticons, using emoticons, because you read the emoticons. Connecting, for example, what Jessica was talking about, the SEL with writing. Maybe in at the end of a day in a 5th grade of primary, or even the 5th grade of secondary, with a question, what makes you feel angry? Why? Let them share their experiences. Let them share their feelings. Let them share their emotions. And by writing, they're expressing them. Maybe something that they could not do it by speaking, through speaking, but maybe by writing. Even with a word, or 2 or 3 words, they are writing. You cannot force your students or our students to start writing from the very beginning. Then again, every time because we tend to do that, now every time we do that, say, I remember, keep in mind, how often do I write in English? Something that is not related to a lesson, that is not related to a school. How often do I write in English? Yes. And Alinda says, I use writing with colors for each word classification. That's it. Especially in primary, yes. Even in secondary. That's a way of building writing skills, step by step. You cannot just throw your students at the end of the pool, at the end deep of the pool. Why? Because then they're going to feel that they have failed. We have to guide them. Yes. Next, please. Sorry about this. For example, look at this activity. Write on the palm of your hand information about yourself: name, birth, nickname, likes and dislikes, etc. It can go step by step. Just name, birth. Show it to your partner next to you, and your partner has to write. So you say Julio, 1969. Okay. So his name is Julio. He was born in 1969. His nickname is Beto. And then you start building up. Maybe the first lesson is just his name, he was born. And then you start thinking, no, but Julio, this is primary, low primary, we haven't taught past tense. So what? You're building writing skills. Don't just focus on accuracy or grammar, because they have to know that they can do it. They have to feel that they can succeed in what they are doing. They are writing. Yes. So obviously you can also use this for speaking lesson, but if you can adapt it for writing, that's much better. And you can use it that at, let's see, 3rd grade of primary, 4th grade of primary. And then if you make it more challenging, you can take it up to 3rd, 4th grade of secondary. Something completely different. I said, well, Julio, I don't want my students to write on their hands because maybe the parents are going to complain. All right. Maybe you use their mobile phones if you are allowed. I mean, if your students are allowed to use mobile phones in class. If not, well, the computer. If not, on a piece of paper. So we use your imagination there. Yes, variety. Maybe the poem next time is on a piece of paper. Maybe next time it's on the board. Maybe next time is stick a piece of paper with the information of everyone there and start writing. Yes. Next slide, please. So the aims of this talk is to refresh some key issues related to writing. Yes, to raise our awareness of what teaching writing implies. Yes, to help ourselves deal with issues surrounding motivation to write in the 21st century. Nobody writes. Some people say nobody writes anymore. Everybody types, obviously, but typing is writing. Yeah. And other researchers say that artificial intelligence is killing writers. But what is the big difference there? What is I would say that hope, the light of hope to keep writing on our side, creativity. Yes, AI can produce, but it produces from what it has stored. But we can be creative. We can help our students be more creative. And that helps building their writing skills. Yes. And also to provide teachers or colleagues with a set of teaching ideas or classroom activities like the one we saw before. Yes. Next, please. So what is writing? Now, process. Writing is a process. Writing is not 2 and 2 equals 4. It's a process. It takes time. It takes thinking. It takes everything, critical thinking, all the key words that everybody talks about nowadays. It's a process. And as a process, it has steps. It has stages. And please don't think about a pre, while, and post-writing lesson plan. It goes beyond that. That's why we have to think out of the box when we're building writing skills. It's not a textbook procedure. It's not what you can find in Jeremy Harmer's textbook. Because every single class, every single student is different. And therefore, we have to cater for everyone. Maybe it won't be possible at the same time, but little by little. Yes. Writing is an ability, yes. It's a physical ability, yes, that helps us put our thoughts into words in a meaningful way. Thoughts, words, meaningful way, with the purpose of communicating a message, communicating feelings, communicating intentions. And that's the difference that makes, that writing should be seen as a process, because writing is different from speaking. For example, speaking is different. In speaking, you could say, hi, hello. Hi, hello. Hi, hello. So I can convey meaning through the intonation. But in writing, how can you do it? You say, he said, hi, hello, angrily. Ah, now I'm creating meaning. Now I'm creating context. He was angry because, and then you continue, giving your students idea, giving your students guidance. You can start with your voice. You can show angrily. And then again, going back to the typical thought that we have sometimes. No, but angrily is an adverb, and I haven't seen adverbs. And come on, remember the building writing skills. Is grammar important? It is. It's part of the procedure, part of the process, but it's not everything. It's not everything. Yes. Writing, and that's something very important too, involves interaction with the reader. Keep that in mind. Involves interaction with the reader. So when I write something, there's a reaction from the reader. I can engage the reading. I can bore the reader. I can make the reader happy, make the reader sad, make the reader interested, make the reader uninterested. So basic interaction. Now, I put the last one is, what is writing to you? What is writing to you? It's just another part of the lesson in my class. Okay, fair enough. It's something that I like because I write a lot. Also fair enough. And remember that writing goes hand in hand with reading. And then go back to my initial question, no? How often do you read in English? For pleasure, not textbooks. I always ask this question because we as teachers need to reflect on what we do, why we do it, and what we don't do and why we don't do it. Because if it doesn't work, something doesn't work, who do we blame? Obviously, the first one to blame is the coordinator, no? The second is the textbook. The third is the institution. The fourth is whatever reason we have. But we never put ourselves up front. No, that's it. It's me. How can I do it? See, I know that writing is a process. How can I start this process with my students? Whether you teach at primary, secondary, or higher level of education. Yes. Can you pass the other teachers? No, the typical, we say, no? Yeah, we all know writing is a process. So what is new, Julio? Yes. Now, the thing is awareness. If we are aware that writing is a process, we not only focus only on language errors. Yes. Why? Because writing is not only about not making mistakes or grammar mistakes. If we just focus on language errors, we're not helping our students to build writing skills, to develop writing skills. We're not helping them. Why? Because I know that I'm going to write and then my teacher is just going to correct the mistakes. And what is the feedback? Just the typical, no cross or circling in red. And now psychologists say don't circle the mistakes in red. Put it in a different color. Speaking of SEL. So feedback. Giving feedback is more useful between the drafts, not when it's done at the end of the task. That's another thing that we have to think about. If we start giving feedback at every stage of the process, it's much better because our students are going to benefit from that. If we just give the final feedback for the final product, it's not useful because we tend to focus only on the grammar mistakes or the use of connectors or the not use of linkers. And this is also part of the awareness here. We teachers need to go from being a marker to a reader. That's the key. We have to become readers, not just markers. Sometimes we don't even pay attention to what the student is writing about. The feedback is just about the language forms or the spelling mistakes. But it's not about the feedback. It says, this is a nice story. I didn't know you had such a large family. And you can connect that with SEL, social emotional learning. You're helping your students if you really become a reader. Otherwise, that's why it says what it means becoming marker from being a marker to a reader. You are responding to the student's writing more than to the form. Yes, I know that sometimes it's so difficult to get away from the shackles, no, or the handcuffs of the grammar, because we love grammar. We love teaching grammar, and that's okay. But by focusing only on the grammar, it's not going to help develop or building our students' writing skills. So if you, speaking of the mindset, if you have that predominance of mindsetness on language, on form, try to go to the other side a little bit, little by little, bit by bit, or at least do it once a week. And give the feedback in general, for example. The stories are great. Some of the stories I read related to this and that. Imagine if you mention my story in front of the class, without mentioning my name, obviously, because it may hurt some feelings, personal feelings. But you say, the teacher read my piece of writing. That's nice. That's a way of motivating. Now, sometimes we say, how can we motivate our students to write more? Just by saying, your writing was excellent, despite it has a lot of grammar mistakes, but I like the way you deal with that problem. I like that. You know? Or if it's spotless, suppose it was prepared and done using artificial intelligence. And I say, hey, Julio, when you speak to me, you make a lot of mistakes. And when you write, this is spotless. Did you do it with artificial intelligence? Maybe Julio is going to say, no, teacher, but obviously I did it. And I say, maybe the teacher can motivate their students just talking, not judging. Try to do it so I can see if you're learning or not, if you're producing better pieces of writing or not, if you're advancing in your studies of English or not. So make them see that you know. Make them see that you understand what they do it, but also give them confidence. And that's another point when you are building whichever skills you develop, whichever skill you want to develop. Confidence. How can you build up confidence in your students? Giving them the right tools, giving them time. But Julio, we have only 2 hours a week, and say, invest 5 minutes of those 2 hours in giving them confidence, in giving them the guidance, the right guidance, and you will see it will be more productive than just having the 2 hours devoted to whatever we want to teach them. I suppose we are not that naive to think that whatever we teach, our students learn. We know that that's not true. Even if you are great teachers, I know you're great teachers, but it doesn't work that way. The process of teaching and learning, that's the beauty of it, right? So can you go to the next, please? In this case, for example, no, that's another activity. You're at a party and you want your friend to write a few lines about it, but you're unable to speak, so you just use gestures, body language mimics. Begin with, yesterday we had a party. What? This, you're giving them the context. Everybody goes to parties, hopefully. If you have someone who doesn't go to parties, ask the class, who doesn't go to parties? Please, at the end of the class, let me know and I will think of another topic. Obviously, you're not going to expose your students in front of everybody. But you see, you're giving them confidence. You're opening to them. And if you're maybe teaching remotely, yes? Thank you, Gustavo. If you're teaching remotely, I prepare a video of myself about this topic without just mimicking, using my body language gestures, and then I give it to you, and then you start writing. That's a way of avoiding the use of artificial intelligence. It's a good way. And you're using technology. Get your students to think that making mistakes in the process of learning, it's okay. Everybody here in this meeting, everybody thinks, and sometimes we repeat, like making mistakes is part of the process of learning. But when our students make mistakes, no! What? No! Third person singular. I told you many times third person singular. You continue writing he, go. So what? What about the story? What about the effort that your students have made in order to produce that piece of writing? That should be the value. Not as devalue the piece of writing just because he said he go instead of he goes. Maybe it's our ego talking. Can you pass the other one, please? Hey, teachers, leave the kids alone. I was going to put a video and say, hey, teachers, leave the kids alone. I don't know if you have heard Pink Floyd. Yes, when that teacher was controlling all the class. I suppose there are a lot of young teachers here, and I don't know if they know Pink Floyd, but I know that, for example, Marco Giron, he should know about Pink Floyd because he likes music. And he's a teacher, a very strict teacher, controlling the students. Do we want that for our students? How do you think your students see you? A fun teacher? You can be fun teacher. But if you focus so much on grammar, on language, on spelling, when you're developing or building your students' writing skills, how do you think they're going to see you? As a controller, as a judge. If you don't give them confidence, no. What is the easy way out? Artificial intelligence. But if you encourage them to do them by themselves, even if they make mistakes, that's a different story. If you're going to value the creativity, that's a different story. What about an activity? I'm going to perform something similar to the one we saw a while ago. Perform what I'm going to write. Talk about what I'm going to write. I ask my students to send them the videos. And then they have to write about that. Can be also collaborative work. In pairs, in groups of 3, they have to invent a story in the class. They have to record themselves in the class. And then they have to write about it. So instead of correcting 30 pieces of homework, you're going to correct only 10. Enough. Or the same version, I mean, the same story, but in different versions. That's another way of avoiding the overuse of artificial intelligence. So you see, there are ways. Obviously, the best should be to do it in class. But if we are teaching remotely, or we don't have enough time because we have to give them homework, so there are ways of avoiding the overuse of artificial intelligence nowadays. I'm not saying don't use it, because there are different ways. Maybe in another workshop or seminar, we can talk about the benefits of artificial intelligence. Obviously, there are drawbacks. And we have to be aware of those drawbacks, because if not, we are going to disappear as teachers. But when you try to develop successful writing skills, look at these ideas. That's Iona Nafil. Is a teacher that has put these first topics, context. I read a question that somebody asked Jessica, how can we make our teenagers love English? Connect with their world. Yes, Teresa, we have to focus on their interests. So what do you like? What you don't like? What do you hate? What you love? What's in fashion nowadays? Would you, I don't know, tattoo yourselves? Make a tattoo on your body? Why? Yes. No. Why? Would you consider to do it in the future? So, stimulating topics. Collaborative writing. You don't have to ask your students, write about the last time you ate something, or you visit an interesting city. Get them to work together. Get them to discuss that question together. Get them to choose a place where all of them have visited. And if one of them, or some of them, haven't even left Lima, well, say something and say, okay, who hasn't left Lima? And then, okay, talk about a place in Lima that you would like to talk about, to write about. Collaborative writing. What are you going to write in the first paragraph? What are you going to write in the second paragraph? Marco says collective writing. Every student writes a sentence, and so they continue doing that, telling a story. Yes, that's another way. But get them together to think about what they are going to write, how they are going to write it, the type of language they want to use, the genre. Yes, that has to do with collaborative writing. And also helps teachers not to correct 30 pieces of homework again, only 10, only 15. Now, activities with a purpose. Hey, what is the purpose of my writing? My teacher is going to read it. My teacher is going to give a feedback, not on the way I wrote it, not on the mistakes I made. It's going to see if my story is something that makes them feel, you can say, all your stories, some of your stories make me feel very, very emotional. I even cried with the story of a person who blah, 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 blah. Imagine to listen to your story. I mean, listen to your teacher talking about your story. How much personal can that be? Give them a purpose. Or if they get them to write something that peers from other class, they're going to read. Or peers from a different school, they're going to read. Why don't you talk to colleagues from different schools? Say, can we do some letter exchange? Introducing themselves? Why not? But Julio, it takes time. Yeah, but you're helping your students. Instead of just get them to write a letter, the typical writer, or an essay, write what you did last weekend, and correcting 30 pieces of homework. Invest your time in doing it like in a week or in 2 weeks. Process. editing, drafting, and then sending to another class, to another school, and vice versa. That's the purpose. No? Focus on critical thinking. Why not? It says, why do you think the teacher gives us homework? Why do you think the teacher makes us write a piece of writing? Get them to think. Why? Even as a teacher, this is useless because I do whatever I do is with my computer, and I have my mobile phone that can translate and write everything. Okay, but you're writing your ideas. No? Awareness raising. How can you raise that awareness of the importance of writing skills, of the importance of learning English, of the importance of using English, of the importance of communicating in English? There was another question, say, like promoting, Jessica was asked the question, and Jessica answered, well, nowadays, somehow, it's easier. Like, if you talk about 30, 40 years ago, where now the world was not globalized, but nowadays, with this globalized world, you don't have to work that hard to make your students understand that English is important. Yeah? And then you have teachers as readers and feedback providers. We have to become readers. I think this is, to me, is one of the most important pillars for building writing skills. Teachers as readers. Don't just focus on language, on spelling. Don't just focus on the mistakes your students or our students make. And feedback providers. Feedback, but feedback, a different kind of feedback from a reader point of view. Your story was fine, but it lacked creativity. It didn't have the ideas that we wanted to develop. That's it. I mean, the approach that you have is different. It's going to make your students feel different about the writing. And also, as some of you mentioned, focus on learners' needs. Focus on learners' needs. What are your learners' needs? What are your needs? For example, if I ask you now, what are your needs? To develop my knowledge, to refresh some ideas, I don't know. But if I were in a face-to-face class, I would be asking you, what are your needs now as teachers? Next, please. Sorry, I said sorry, but no. Teachers should stop responding to the piece of writing as item checkers and become real readers. That's something that I'm going to be pounding on. Yes. Evaluators, you said, teacher, but we have to put some grades and we have to evaluate to assess the writing. Yes, part of our job. But instead of just being evaluators, yes, we can have a different approach. We can react to the message of the student's text. That's why it's not, I say, why do we have to get our students to write an essay of 200 words? Okay, if you're preparing your students to take an international exam, that's fair. But if not, no. Yes? By the way, if you're going to see someone passing behind me, is my wife. Yes, so there you are. So react to the reading, not to the work itself. No? And expand from being a descriptive kind of teacher, correcting or assessing written work, to a more personal and reactive. I like your story because it really contained all the aspects that we were looking for. I didn't like your story because it was very simple. You didn't go any further than just giving A, B, and C. Enough. And if you know that it was done using artificial intelligence, I said, well, next time I will put you a good grade because now you have 0. Teacher, why? Because I did my homework. Yeah, but this is not you. In that case, you're reacting to the text. You're reacting to that. If you're at schools, I suppose most of you are at schools, in that case, the danger of artificial intelligence is less, of the use of artificial intelligence is less than when you are working remotely or when you are giving homework maybe to do at home, no? But if you're working in class, then you can really, really exploit what we're dealing with now. Try and see what happens. I'm not saying do it. I just say try and see what happens. And maybe next time you could say, Julio, yeah, you were on the right track. Or Julio, your ideas, 0, man. Okay, fair enough. But at least you tried. Yes? Please, next. Yes. Obviously, our, teacher selves, no? Sometimes that teacher self, being thinking about the teacher self, sometimes blocks our whole horizon that we have in front of us. No? Because I have to have the control. I'm the teacher. I'm the super teacher. And we want to have the control. Yes. So that's why we need to think about being a reader, not just being an evaluator. No. So we are facilitators. This word. Now everybody uses this. The teacher has to be a facilitator. And yes, but how do you see yourselves as facilitators when building writing skills in your students? How? No. So we have to create context. We have to work to get them to work collaboratively. We have to coach them. Yes. We have to guide. I mean, when you're talking about guidance, it says, hey, how are you going to start your essay? If you're working on an essay, if you're working on a story, how are you going to do it? What am I asking you to do? Yes, we'll have to talk about our last class, okay? So you're talking about how are you going to start? Ask your students for ideas. Ask them to say, okay, now listen to your partners or to peers' ideas. Take notes of that. Then get together, discuss. Now write a first draft. How many paragraphs are you going to write? 2, 3, 4? The first paragraph is going to be about what? Don't give them, that's why it's guidance. That's why it's facilitator. You facilitate the first steps, but then you get or let your students do the rest. Let them, you see, you're helping them, but not with everything. They have to think. Yes? Please, next. So for rhymes, the presence of a real reader, not a judge, will help learners establish the goal of their writing, communication with the reader. Speaking of awareness, yes? A real reader. You have to be, my dear friends and colleagues, do it. At least try once or twice and see how it works. Because usually we are more on the side of a judge than on the side of a real reader. And if we become a real reader, the students will see a purpose for their writing. That's communication. That's building writing skills. Yes. Now, how can we, I have 2 ideas here from Penier and Jeremy Harmer. No? For example, Penier says that construction of class magazines, as well as the display of students writing up on a bulletin board. Or maybe on your CIEP, I think is not the system that you use, no? Why don't you upload those works that you have the right to? Maybe erase the names. Erase the names, or white out the names and then put it on the board. So you can be reading Julio's story, but you don't know that it's Julio's story, but say, wow, this is interesting. And maybe Julio is behind that person and say, he liked my story. Or, wow, this right. What? Oh, no, I cannot believe that. There is a reaction to the writing. Yes. Jeremy Harmon says, adding the setting up of a classroom websites where students' work could be published. Imagine, Jeremy Harmon wrote that in 2001. Are we using websites now? I mean, in that way? Are we? Shall we? Would we? Those are questions that you have to ask yourselves and see if it's possible or not. And again, it's a process. No, I'm going to start with 5th grade of primary, and they process. Yes. It's a process, again. Drafts, editing, and final product. Yes, please, the next one. Writing process, as a process, you gather information. The typical, no, we brainstorm ideas. No, you gather information, but how can you help your students gathering information? That's creating the context. You set the context, and then you get your students to brainstorm ideas, to share ideas. Now, how you do it, that's your expertise, because you're experts on that. But if you keep in mind that writing is a process and it takes time, even if they are in the 5th grade of secondary, it takes time. Yes. How can you organize? How can you help them organize what they're going to write? And then drafting, producing the first draft, or what they call rough draft. And it's not only one, it could be 2 or 3. That's why it's a process. And maybe if you want, in terms of assessment, of evaluation, you can evaluate the drafting process too. But again, without being a judge, just checking if they have paid attention to your feedback. No? Then editing. Get them to work in pairs and edit the works. The piece of work, sorry. No, so now I'm going to check Marco's piece of homework, and he's going to check mine. They're going to check about what? Maybe, yeah, okay. You want to focus on language? Okay. Focus on spelling? All right. But also getting to focus on the content. On the content. According to the prompts you have given them. Yes. And also that at the end is producing a final draft. And that's the final, maybe the global evaluation that you want to give your students. The global assessment. You know? That's why when you want to assess writing, try to have a set of rubrics. Work with your team, your teachers' team, your staff, rubrics to assess, to correct writing. If you have certain rubrics, then your mind will be like a little bit away from being a judge or being just a grader or a corrector. You see, there are different tools that you can use for that. Yes. Next, please. So let's write. No, let's write. No, this is not enough. The teacher, we should encourage our students to think about the audience. Who's going to read it? And what the readers need to know. So now we're working maybe on the environment. You're going to write a letter to a newspaper. Yes? About, the problems with environment. What do readers need to know in order to capture their attention? Teacher, I want to put a picture. Put a picture. Teacher, I want to use this headline. All right, that's great. No, this is too much. But I'm not telling them no. It should be with better with a comma here. No, just this is too much. Please reduce it. Please expand it. So I get them to also think and develop their critical thinking in that way. No, teachers should help our students to realize. Speaking of writing, the spelling there is with S, okay, not with C. To realize that what they can put down, what they can do on paper, no, what they can put on paper or type on the screen, that can be changed. They have to realize that. Yes. Things can be deleted, added, reconstructed, organized, etc. Your students need to know that. Maybe you can think, but Julio, that's obvious. Yeah, obvious to you, but not to your students. And that should be built from primary sentences, at sentence level, at word level. In kindergarten, when they recognize the words through pictures. No, when you're talking hand, hand, and then you put in, two hands, or hands. So the kid is, because in a kindergarten you say, now, to make it plural, you have to add the S. They haven't developed that level of cognition. But they realize that. Yes, next, please. So, another question is, writing is a process or a product? I would say it's both. That's why maybe in your rubrics, you say a grade for the process and a grade for the product. So you have the product is emphasis more on structures, grammar, sentence structure, spelling, punctuation, vocabulary, linking. How do you link? No, talking about coherence and cohesion. Yeah, content less important than mechanics. Process considers audience and purpose. Teacher feedback and peer feedback is essential. Peer feedback, imagine. And when you're working on peer feedback, you're also developing speaking skills, listening skills. Depending on the level, obviously, on the grade you are teaching, no? Content, organization, and mechanics are significant, no? Writing stages allow for learner interaction with teacher and peers. That's why it's a skill. That's why it's a process. Yes. Next, please. So now what? Now, please, you're going to write, yes, a composition of 200 words talking about building writing skills. You can send it to my email, which I'm going to write now, and I'll give you 15 minutes to do it, please. Okay, do it. Some of you say, what? Julio has gone crazy. Yes? No, my dear friends, I'm not going to do that. No, but I'm just telling you something that it may sound familiar to you. Yes, please, next. For example, this one. No? Write a letter. What is your approach now? Well, that's mine. No? I create context. I promote or give ideas. I give ideas or promote to share ideas. I help with organization or the development of that piece of writing, and I give some guidance when needed. And he said, write a letter. It's a letter. It's not an essay. It's a letter. But what's going to be? How are you going to start a letter? Who are you going to write the letter? No. So I'm going to write it to the principal of the school. Okay. So is it going to be formal or informal language? No? Are you going to say, hi, principal? Or you're going to say, hello, dear Mr. Principal. What is best? What is better? Dear Mr. Principal. Why? Because it's a formal. Okay. So you see, I'm helping my students to decide by themselves, for themselves. But what happens if you say, well, I want to put, hi, Mr. Principal. Why? No, because I'm a child. Okay, you have to respect that. And that's difficult for a teacher. That's difficult for me, because you have to respect that. It's my student's choice. It's not right, it's not wrong. It's my student's choice. No? Maybe next time I can ask that student, hey, Julio, can you write it in a formal way? Because the informal letter was brilliant, excellent, good ideas, very good suggestions for the principal of this school. But can you next time giving suggestions for the sports that we do in school? Can you change it, make it informal? Try to convince that student or those students. So writing a letter is not just, dear, please, how do you start a letter? Dear, the date is here. How do you finish the letter? It's not like that. In that way, you're not helping building your students' writing skills. Yes, next, please. Look at that there, no? Letter writing, TV standards, okay? You create context. This is just an idea of an activity. How you approach that idea depends on you. Depends on the kind of students you have. Depends on the level of your students. Depends on the number of hours your students have, because then you will know about the command of language, about the way they think. Maybe this is for 4th grade, 5th grade, or you're teaching secondary or in a language institute for a low intermediate or high intermediate. Obviously, the product will be different. You know? So you are fed up with the standard of programs on the television so much that you hardly watch TV anymore. Things that annoy you include, and you have everything. Maybe you can add or say, if you don't agree with this, you can add 1 more or 2 more. You can eliminate the ones that you don't want to write about. Give them freedom. Give them independence. Promote critical thinking. Promote that raising awareness that we talked about. Next, please. That's another one. No? So write a letter to ITV, that's like channel 4, detailing your complaints. Now, you give the prompts. Write a letter, make suggestions, no? Write a list of points you need to include. Put these points in order. So now, you can ask, okay, I have these ideas. Do you want to eliminate another one? Do you want to change the order? Try to promote creativity in your students. Teacher, I don't want to use those 8. Okay, how do you want to do it? I want to go to the final copy. That's up to you, huh? But at least try to follow 2 or 3 of those steps. They're going to help you. Why? Because I'm going to also assess or evaluate part of this process, not just the final product. That's a way of helping your students building their writing skills. Yes. Next, please. Now, can we build writing skills if we teach it? Of course. Can we build writing skills if we teach it? Yes. We mentioned one example. Yes. So even if you get them to recognize and write a letter, not a letter, but just a letter A, B, or C, you're getting your young learners to build their writing skills. Again, process. Yes. Next, please. This is an example, no? 5 sentences poem. First discuss, then brainstorm, then answer prompts, then the structure. And you guide them, no? Giving them an example. The beach feels like, the beach tastes like, the beach sounds like, the beach looks like, the beach smells like. So give them everything. Yes? So I think I'm going to stop here because time is a killer. Yes? And I really hope I have given you some ideas. I really hope I have made you think about what building writing skills imply. No? So it goes beyond the typical pre, while, and post writing. It goes more, and just try to keep that idea that you should, or we teachers should become readers rather than judges. Yes. Thank you very much. Now, Gustavo, yes, go with the questions, please. I'm sorry for the extension of time. Maria, I would like to explore how to strengthen the teaching writing skills in students with learning difficulties. That depends on the kind of learning difficulties in your students you may have. No, obviously, because we've had students, maybe they have problems with their hands. How can they write? No? But they are able to type. So we work with a computer. Yes, and sometimes they are able to write. I mean, to speak to the computer, and the computer starts writing. There are devices to help with learners with that. Yes, so that's a way. Now, what happens if you have students with behavioral problems? Yes, as Jessica say, no, work on the SEL and adapt it to the writing. As I say, what makes you angry? Why do you hit your friends? Get them to think. Okay, write it. Write it. What happens if you have a student who's blind? What happens if you have a student with a very serious learning difficulty? Adapt the task to the level of that student. Yes. Maybe even just by using your body, by using, or get the student to dictate. Dictation. But Julio, that's not writing, that's speaking. But at least he can see what the other person writes. And in a way, that writing belongs to that person, to that student. Yes. And again, if you see that as a process, if you have students with learning difficulties, if you see the writing as a process, believe me that your students are going to benefit from that. If you have a student with learning difficulty and you just write a letter of 200 words, no way. It's not going to happen. And we don't have to complain about it, because we're not helping. We're not giving enough guidance to that student. Yes. Any other question? Jenny, uses of grammar in using in real life. I didn't really see here, but if you're thinking about using grammar in real life through writing, definitely. No, what would you do if you lived in China, for example? If I lived in China, I would. In that way, they're using the second conditional, but you're not saying, hey, remember the second conditional. Hey, remember that you have to use would, and what happens if you uses could? What happens if you uses should? It's acceptable. Our beloved, no, you know what grammar point I'm going to say. The ones who know me already. Our beloved present perfect. Have you ever? And what happens if you say, yeah, he have been to Cusco twice. Oh my God, that's not right. But you have to see yourself as a reader. Is he using the present perfect in real life? Yes. Is he using in his story, personal story? Yes. Has he made a mistake? Yes. Is it interfering with communication? No. mission accomplished. Any other question? Eliana says, how can I work with a child with language problems? You mean speech problems? If it's speech, I think writing will help a lot, yes? If it's the command of language in terms of level of handling the language, then that's why if you become a reader rather than a corrector or a judge, it will help in the sense of, has he accomplished the objective of this writing task, which is to communicate his or her complaints about the school lunch, for example, lunchtime or break time? Julio, but he makes a lot of mistakes. He doesn't or she doesn't use the third person singular. My question goes back. Has he accomplished the task? Yes. And that's why, Eliana, the use of certain rules to correct, to grade are important. The rubrics. It's important to, we can sit together in a school, if you're teaching a school, sit together and elaborate a set of rubrics for primary, low primary, higher primary, low secondary, and higher secondary. 5 or 6, but you can say, no, language handling, no, you can say discourse management or use of cohesion and coherence, but you have to know, what am I looking for? No, you can put a communication, and then so you can, maybe you can say something like, I'm just now thinking, inventing, no, making it up, but communication, and then you can think about what else can I think about when you're making rubrics for that? Interactivity with the reader, I don't know. Yes, but having a set of rubrics for correcting the homework will help you not only to focus on language problems. That's Eliana. If I say Julio are a teacher, and Eliana be a teacher also, and I start writing that. The thing is, if I read it and if I understand it, that student has accomplished part of the task successfully in the sense of communicating his or her ideas. Maybe in the part of language handling has problems, but you're not going to fail that student because that student has 2 or 3 or 4 terrible grammar mistakes. Because you are building writing skills. You are not using that writing task in order to assess grammar. Obviously, you can have writing tasks related to grammar, but if you're developing writing skills, grammar is important, yes, but it's not the important thing. That's what we have to keep in mind. Yes. Okay. Any other question? Rumor, gossip? Lourdes, how can I do funny classes when they need to write? I think the best moment to do it is when you create context. When you start creating context, no? That's the moment. And being a fun teacher, it's also a skill. Not everybody can be a fun teacher. No? So we have to develop that skill. If you have that skill already, being a fun teacher, yes, then it will be easier for you to have these fun classes when they need to write, no? Especially at the beginning when you create context, or when they are giving you brainstorming ideas, or when they go to the board and start brainstorming ideas, no? When you say maybe a pink cat, wow, a pink cat. Imagine a pink cat. I don't know. You have to use your artistic skills too, so you can make your classes fun. Yes, but then once they are in the process, maybe when they're in the process of drafting, yes, and you start reading, and I say, "Wow, this is so fun. Can you put it in a different way?" Because sometimes the fun part comes from the students, huh? So do not underestimate your students, and you can exploit that with all the class. Obviously, also that depends on the kind of rapport you have with your students. Yes. So there are different factors in order to make a fun class when in a process of writing, or in the process of building your students' writing skills. Right? All right. That's it. Gustavo? Yes? Okay, my dear friends, thank you very much. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julio. I will certainly not judge my students in the future. Thank you for your insightful presentation. Well, we want to extend our most heartfelt thanks to Centro Peruano Americano El Cultural for their invaluable support in organizing this event. Please take a moment to learn more about El Cultural by watching the following video.
We are committed to offering you a transformative journey toward English fluency. Our expert teachers will be with you every step of the way, providing guidance and personalized support. With dynamic, interactive classes that encourage active participation and hands-on learning, we cater to the ages 3 to 13 in our Children and Juniors program, and to the ages 14 and up in our Teens and Adults program. Our collaborative approach ensures that you'll effectively build your communication skills and gain the confidence you need to thrive. Join us today and unlock a world of opportunities with English. Contact us now to start your journey with El Cultural.
So, we have reached the end of the TDC 2024 virtual version. We want to thank all the speakers, consultants, and publishers who have participated, but especially to the international community of English teachers who have been connected with the sole objective of expanding your knowledge and to develop your educational work. It's nice to thank the SBS team as well. Thank you very much, SBS. And again, we remind you to obtain the certificates of attendance. You must be registered. If you still haven't registered, please do it now. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
you